Mark Sanders.
He is a naturopathic doctor,
A music lover, and truly an eclectic practitioner who is constantly evolving to give results and healings to his clients, his patients, and humanity.
I think part of what has been a bit of an exploration for me in the last couple of years and it's really interesting because it's kind of evolved within my practice. I do a lot of different things. I work with nutrition, diets, homeopathic medicines, herbal medicines. I do cranial sacral therapy. I've worked with people doing counseling, a lot of different things. And pretty much my office manager is always asking me, do you work with this? And I always tell her the answer is always yes. The question is it something that I've always worked with? The answer is not necessarily, but there are a lot of similarities in different conditions. And I think in the conventional world, people are looking for, like, do you know something about this? Have you treated a patient with this? And yet, in my world, it's different because you're looking at the body very differently.
Mm-hmm.
As a whole organism.
Right.
Where if somebody has rheumatoid arthritis or psoriasis or colitis or, what do those things have in common? Well, they have inflammation in common. Mm-hmm. So that's really the driving force of that particular, those conditions. So if you have treated people with chronic inflammation, then you can certainly apply principles from what you've done with different people, to use for those conditions. So it's a different way of looking at the body. It's not condition centered. It's more what's happening within the body. So it's more physiology and kind of a, understanding of the body in that way. So kind of what took place, I've been in music since I was a kid. I mean, I played piano when I was young and picked up the guitar in high school, jammed through high school, and had a blast with that. And then, once I went to naturopathic school, everything was kind of put on the side. Music was not necessarily a priority anymore. And a couple of years ago, my wife found this flyer for this woman who was doing a sound healing workshop. Mm-hmm. Very intriguing for me. And her name is Meg Ruby. She's a concert pianist. And it was kind of interesting because we walked into, so it was a Friday night and a Saturday, or actually Saturday night, like sound healing session, and then a Sunday afternoon workshop. So we kind of did both because I was like, wow, we got nothing to lose.
We can retreat.
Exactly. And so, Sunday morning was open, so it was in the afternoon. So that worked with our schedule.
Yeah.
And so the Saturday night was really cool. Like she had piano, she had a bowl, she had, I forget what they're like these little, you play with your thumbs. There are these, like a thumb piano or something like that. It's an African instrument, actually.
Oh, interesting.
And then she had some other stuff that's a cajon, which is a percussion.
Yes, I know that.
So she had all this stuff.
Set.
Yeah. So she kind of for an hour she played all these different instruments. It was probably one of the most relaxing times I've had in a very long time. My wife said I was snoring, but I don't remember that part. But it was, I think for me, it was inspirational because I never thought about music and sound being part of healing process. I mean, for some people, they probably have known that for a long time. I have so much on my plate. It's always adding more stuff, and looking at new things is not always that easy. And so the next day we walked in for the workshop, and my wife and I were the only ones signed up for the workshop. So I, asked her if she was actually going to do it because, there's just the two of us. And she was very kind and said, no, 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 this will give me a chance to meet people, and I'm new to so it'll be fun to kind of explore this. So we kind of had a private tutoring session, sound healing. And she went into a lot of detail and, gave us a lot of really good information. And for me, it was kind of like, bridging music to medicine together, which was I had never thought about doing it. I was very inspired to, add some stuff. And what she had done kind of at the end of the sound session on Saturday night was she said, hey, if you have an instrument that you play, bring it on Sunday. And so I'm a performance anxiety person. So if you act in public, I'm usually nervous. So I had been kind of learning how to play Native American flute. So I brought my flute. And so at the end of the workshop, she basically looked at me and said, okay, I think it's time that you do your first sound healing, session. And so I'm going to lay here, your wife's going to lay here, and you're going to, do your thing. And I was like, okay, well, what toys can I play with here? 'Cause things. And she just let it open to whatever I wanted to do. I did. So I had a blast for like 20 minutes just going, there's like, as long as there were no expectations, wasn't following a script, everything was really improv.
Yeah.
And so, at the end, and of course I played my flutes, which was really embarrassing to me, but, they both really liked it. At the end, she said, it was really very relaxing, which was very great, very positive to hear. So that kind of got me going into, okay, so how do I, what do I do with this information? So kind of over, months process, I got exposed to some other sound healers, and, I was very inspired to look at drumming. And so I bought a goat skin, shamanic goat skin frame drum. It's a 22-inch drum, and I actually bought another one later on that's 30 inches. So I used that, and what I found with different patients is just to incorporating some of this stuff into what I'm already doing. It really affects the nervous system. So any kind of nervous system disorder, whether it's, somebody who's stuck in fight or flight, or somebody who has like mold toxicity and brain fog, or Lyme disease and brain fog, just doing some sound healing sessions, even over the phone, have completely changed, what they experience. And it's been really interesting. My latest instrument is a didgeridoo, so I've been kind of working with that.
What's that? Do you have it with you?
I do have it with me, actually. I don't know, it won't fit in the screen, but it's basically eucalyptus wood that's been hollowed out by termites, and it's an Australian instrument. So it's they said, I've heard different things. Somebody said that it was 2,000 years old. Somebody else said it was 10,000 years old, but I think it's one of the first woodwind instruments that have ever been played. And so it has a kind of a unique sound. I liked it. I kind of fell in love with it because the frequencies are very low. Low frequencies tend to be more healing. The higher frequencies tend to be more activating. And what was interesting recently was I was listening to a lecture of this guy who does sound healing with didgeridoo, and he was talking about how there's frequencies that you don't hear, that are basically, under what we hear, and then there's sounds that are over what we hear, and the ones that are over what we hear would be considered ultrasound. Which, when I was in naturopathic school, we used ultrasound for therapeutic, purposes.
Yeah.
So I, started experimenting with a couple patients who had like ankle pain, and one person had neck pain, low back pain, and just playing the didgeridoo, blowing it right on that particular area, they all had benefits from it right away. The one person who had a bone spur, which is usually very painful, literally the pain went away in about 10 seconds and did back the same way. So it's been an interesting. I think there's so much information that's out there. It's just more obscure and kind of downplayed because there's not a lot of research out there. But there's a couple guys who are doing a lot more research and trying to put things together and doing some really good work. One guy his name is Jeffrey Thompson. He's I think he's an osteopathic doctor. I'm not positive, but he has some different CDs out there for sleep, for brain, and his stuff is for real. I've listened to it and it affects me right away. There's another guy called David Gibson who runs an institute in, I think it's Oregon. I just recently read his book on the complete guide to sound healing, which, I think there is no such thing, but, he touches on a lot of different things and has some really good starting points. And these guys have been doing it for 20, 30 years. It's not like it's
not new.
No, it's not new. So they're pioneers way before me. And then there's other people around the country that do kind of certification programs for sound healing. I'm interested in doing one. I have been wanting to do one with a woman. Her name is Pat Moffat. But I guess she was sick, so she postponed her training from this year to next year. So we'll see what happens with that. But I'm already incorporating things in as I learn. I bring things into my practice.
Yeah.
Not afraid to. Most of my patients know that I'm a little wacky, and I usually, if I say I'm going to try something new, it's something they never even thought of before. Whether it's drum or the didgeridoo or even just breathing or something like that. So that's kind of a little nutshell of what's been happening.
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, I know one of the things I always tell, part of my story and why I became a nutritional therapy consultant is that I spend a lot of money into clean food, organic, grass-fed, all of that. And I was still struggling. I wasn't understanding until when I went to Nutritional Therapy Association and went through that course that digestion starts in the brain. The mechanical process starts in the mouth, but it starts in the brain when the brain is telling your stomach to get the enzymes ready to start the process. And one of the things, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, like fight or flight, sympathetic or parasympathetic. Mm-hmm. So you can just be a little bit of either one, you're either or. Right. And just learning that alone, just thinking about, and when I tell my clients, just, sit down, smell your food, get ready. It was the biggest game changer for me because I'm spending all this money in buying this when the goal of nourishing is really to feed ourselves. And so what's going to transport that is digestion, and it starts here. So yeah, I'm always very intrigued because I'm very type A personality, like high performance. And so this is me. So music for me has been huge just growing up, and my relationship with that too. And just like, I like to rewrite music. I like different kinds of music. And recently I was into just listening to dolphin sounds. And that's at about a year. And that in itself with, I've been doing a lot of language work and getting trained in that part. And just language work with music together has been a paradigm and a paradigm shift completely. And so that was around the same time where one of the coaches I was working with, he told me about, you need to get a bowl. And that's something that it just kind of like, it stayed there as like, okay, I'll get to that. And then when you mentioned it, I was very intrigued. And I love that you are so open. What did you say your patients call you? Wacky? Is that what term you use?
Yeah, I'm a little whack. I'm a little out there. Even my colleagues probably would say that.
Yeah, no, that's great. That to me is just someone who's open to information, because I think when we make things black and white, we run into that problem.
Well, I think part of that is, I'm always looking for what's going to work better. And just because I learned it in school doesn't mean that is the be all end all.
Right.
And I think what you, kind of at the same time as a practitioner, you have to evolve. You can't just do the same things. And for me, I get bored. If I do the same things, I get bored. So, having something new to work with is actually very, it's very helpful for me. It keeps me energized. It's not that I throw the old stuff away, but I learn how to incorporate it so that I'm doing, more things that are cutting edge for me that I'm learning, and also, continuing in with how to incorporate some things that I know works really well, depending on what's coming in. But I think, the bowls are extremely powerful. What's interesting is kind of the nature of vibration is that we are vibrational, whether we like it or not. We are all vibrating at certain frequencies, and some frequencies connect with us more than others. David Gibson talks about how people have like a home note, meaning that there's a specific note that we resonate with, and when that note is played, we will automatically kind of shift into a different state, a nervous system, immune system, all that stuff. And, they do it, they actually figure it out for you, but you can kind of figure it out yourself, as well. But a lot of the bowls are really interesting because there's such a dominant vibration that you can't help but start to vibrate with them. It was interesting. One of my office in Connecticut actually had me do a sound night with everybody who was in the office. So you're talking about colleagues, medical doctors, nutritionists. I mean, everybody who was there, all in this room together, having never had experienced this before. And, I had my 8 bowls all set up, ready to go, and, playing them for, a good time, and played with my drum. People were kind of leaving because they had other things going on. Every one of them was like, oh my gosh, I could not believe what I was sensing and just how relaxing it was. And even my coworker who owns the practice, she was really blown away. So it's just kind of, I think, part of what it's not, there's a lot of purposes behind some of these things. They can be very narrow and targeted towards specific things, like me playing the didgeridoo on somebody's, sprained ankle or whatever, to just overall having, kind of resetting our systems with the frequencies that, are really beneficial. The interesting thing with the bowls is that a lot of them do correspond to, every chakra has a specific note to it. And so by playing those notes, you stimulate those chakras a little bit, or normalize those chakras. I know that's a concept that's not typically talked about very much in
so glad you brought it up.
Christian circles or whatever, because it's just, kind of more associated with Hinduism. And I think my open-mindedness has always been that, well, if it exists, then it should be pretty obvious. And, even in different cultures, they all talk about chakras. So I don't think it's something that is unusual. It's just not something that we, kind of talk about here in the States, because our medicine doesn't fit with that.
Mm-hmm.
If you're doing energy medicine, whether it's sound healing or essential oils or something like that, it makes a difference with all the subtle things that are going on in our body. I look at it as just part of our anatomy, because but we just don't live in that world here in the States. We're very much physical, somewhat mental, emotional, spiritual. Forget that. That's not really part of medicine, and it is.
Right.
But our idea of anatomy is very physical. It's the conventional world. Kind of looking at the body as replaceable parts and
Right.
things like that. Which I respect that. I don't disregard that, and I'm not anti-conventional, but I think it's very narrow-minded in terms of what medicine is.
Yes.
For me to say, well, yeah, your medicine today is going to be, I'm going to play the drum for 20 minutes. Most people would hang up, or
Yeah.
it wouldn't be part of their treatment plan. But,
right.
Most of my patients know me well enough that I don't do things that don't work. Kind of getting back to what I said earlier, is that I'm looking for things that make people better. Like their conditions change, their health improves, and you can't find that in a drug necessarily. You can help symptoms, but you're not going to cure anything necessarily with a drug, other than antibiotics, getting rid of bacteria.
And you're certainly not going to get to the roots with medicine.
No, you're not. And especially if certain conditions can have an emotional piece to them. And that all conditions are based on emotional events and things that have happened, or trauma. Some of them can be, some of them are not. Some of them, it's kind of intermeshed. And, you can deal with all the physical stuff, but if you don't deal with the mental, emotional pieces, then you're not going to get to the root of what's going on there too. So that's where, in the world of naturopathic medicine, I think it's very broad, which for anybody in the conventional world, it's too broad. And anybody who's trying to be a practitioner, it's too broad because it's so big. Like everything, just looking at the mental sphere is huge. And to add in all these other pieces just makes it that much more complicated. But I think if you look at things from the big picture, you get a much better sense of what's going on for that situation, and how are you going to bring a better place of health to that person.
Right. Because it's really about the whole person, mind,
exactly.
Especially with mind-body connection that we miss.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that you are open because with your patients and trying new things, because everyone's different. One of the things I always push is, bio-individuality. So so one thing that's going to work for someone's not going to work to the spouse, especially in spouses, because I think for me that was a huge frustration when I first stepped into the world of just health and wellness. When my husband and I, he did the research on paleo primal back in 2012, and I still remember how we wiped out a whole kitchen. And he lost 20 pounds in 3 weeks.
Typical for guys. Yeah.
Right. And so that started my journey of just asking questions. And the first questions I was asking were not healthy, because they were all towards what's wrong with me. What's wrong with me? What am I doing? Why can't I lose weight? And so when this is one of the things I'm very passionate about sharing with people, bioindividuality is, we're all different. And so it's focusing on our journey and our process. There are times that things are quick. Like for me, my acne did clear up right away when I stopped eating bread, and so, but my weight was still there. So it's just about learning how to understand the process, that we're in a marathon versus a sprint.
Yeah.
So, and when you said you're focused on like the results of people feeling better, I think your patients are very lucky to have you to understand that you're going to do what it takes just to get them feeling better, you know. So I appreciate that. That's awesome. And that wraps up our interview with Dr. Mark Sanders. You could follow him at Trinity Wellness Center, as well as his Connecticut practice at Fairfield Family Health, where they're currently hosting live sound bowl healing hour sessions for free.